Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Boys to Men Foundation webinar on what do men want. Yes, what do men want? Before we get to that discussion, we'd like to give you some background and introduce the panelists. Boys to Men Foundation is a Nigerian non-governmental organization established in November 2017 by Mrs. Ifoma I. Idigbe. The foundation is dedicated to supporting boys and men to become their best selves and so to positively impact the communities in which they live. To do this, there must be fundamental changes to our way of thinking, being, and doing, and a change in attitude to gender roles. To quote Thomas Page McBee, we must create a culture where boys are not raised to see masculinity and humanity as mutually exclusive. We must raise the right kind of men to face the challenges of the new age and drive equity within the social structure. We don't want our boys and men to fall behind and fall through the proverbial cracks. We want both males and females to thrive and excel, each gender making its own contribution to society. We must therefore support the development of a culture of excellence and promote confidence in both genders. This is the vision and mission of Boys to Men Foundation and our ultimate goal that males become global leaders with integrity. Today, our discussion revolves around the question, what do men want? Men do not exist to be the seed, care for others, and to be strong. Men also want to be supported and to live full, active lives with all its contradictions. What do men want? What we want and what we can have are not always the same thing. Life often has to be negotiated. Society has certain expectations of men and women, and these also need to be negotiated in our contemporary world. So, what do men want, really? Let's find out. Our future may depend on it. We hope that this webinar will provide some insights into what men want, recognizing that different men want different things. We would now like to introduce our panelists for what promises to be a really interesting conversation. Our panelists, comprised of 3 gentlemen and 1 lady, are brilliant young people with new thinking, new perspectives, new expectations, the leaders of tomorrow. What men want will impact on how women and children live their lives, and what they can get will be negotiated by the expectations of women and children in their lives. This may prove to be a conundrum. Chukwuyemisi Isiche. Chukwuyemisi is a qualified chartered accountant, a 2021 scholar of the Nigerian University of Technology and Management, and an accounting honors graduate from the Pan-Atlantic University. She is a finance and investment enthusiast, excited about the possibilities of financial markets. Just like her first name, Chukwuyemisi is an unusual young woman with varied interests spanning tabletop games, fashion, music, and film. She's also engaged in creative writing and won the 2020 African Writers Lockdown Challenge for flash fiction. Whenever she isn't busy thinking about new storylines for Nigerian films, she loves reading African literature. Chukwuyemisi is a strong advocate for Nigerian women's rights and believes that we all should be feminists. Femi Akinshe. Femi is a self-styled thinker and tinkerer. He's a lover of all things philosophical and spends time pondering the tough questions around social, religious, economic, political, and general human issues. When he's not thinking though, he spends time as a co-founder at Addict Creative, a creative boutique that helps businesses tell stories through design, and also doubles as a product specialist with Paystack, one of Africa's leading fintech companies. Osita Uchi. Born in Enugu, Nigeria, Uche Osita began the Okike Prize for Literature, an all-undergraduate literature prize in Nigeria, and was selected as Paul's Dorenji's campus ambassador and NHEF scholar in 2016 and 2017, respectively. He is an avid writer with several published writings in national and international media. After being called to the Nigerian bar and pivoting to business and technology, Osita co-founded the Mobile Tech Hub and Flourish Opportunities Network, both connecting young Africans to digital upskilling and scholarship opportunities, respectively. He's also a co-founder at Shopee, a fast-growing fintech securing e-commerce transactions in Africa. Morakinyo Adejare. Morakinyo is a pharmacist turned product designer and a scholar of the Nigerian University of Technology and Management. Morakinyo is passionate about leveraging human-centered design to create delightfully digital products that positively impact people, the environment, and society. His interests are varied and span healthcare, design, art, real estate, and music. He is a strong advocate for equity, inclusion, and diversity in the workplace and in society. Our moderator for this panel discussion is Emmanuel Nwachukwu. Emmanuel, unfazed by conformity, consistently questions single stories and seeks balance in arguments. He's a big fan of philosophical debate and conversations about religion, politics, and social issues. Emmanuel is a mechanical engineer working in the oil and gas industry, as well as a co-founder at Shopee, a fast-growing fintech company that secures e-commerce transactions across Africa. He's also a business developer for Light Up Africa, a startup that alleviates energy poverty by distributing solar-powered batteries. We would now like to ask Emmanuel to take over and lead this discussion.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so excited about the session, and I'm sure you are too. Our esteemed panelists, they've been preparing themselves, and they are very excited and powered to actually give you and share their insights with you. We'll just jump right to it. In 2018, Michael Ian Black published an opinion piece in the New York Times. And one thing he said that stuck with me is, and I quote, "To be a girl today is to be the beneficiary of decades of conversation about the complexities of womanhood, its many forms and expressions. Boys, though, have been left behind. No commensurate measurement has emerged to help them navigate towards a full expression of their gender. It's no longer enough to be a man. We no longer even know what it means to be a man." So you see, what Michael Black highlighted is the reason why over the years there has been a lot of debates, articles, and books on the topic of masculinity. In fact, some have said we should actually redefine masculinity. There is just a divergence of opinions. So today I'd like to start the session by touching base with our esteemed panelists on this dilemma of what it means to be a man. But while they gather their thoughts, I'd like to encourage the audience to join the conversation by using the chat box. And also, this panel session is going to be different from most panel sessions. So we're going to take questions as the panel session goes on. So you do not have to wait till the end of the session before you drop your questions. Just shoot them as they come to you, and we'll attend to them as soon as we can. So back to the discussion. Femi, what does it mean to be a man?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you to the Boys to Men Foundation for having me. So what does it mean to be a man? I think that if anyone gives you a straight answer to that, the person either doesn't know what they're talking about, or the person is very, away from reality. Because the truth is, for one, in this current century, it's difficult to define anything that has to do with social, anything that is social or anything that is conceptual in nature. It's difficult to define it. So if you see a cup, for instance, you can say, oh, this is a cup because it looks like this. But men, to define a man, you would have to either be able to gather all men, understand their own different journeys, understand their own personalities, to be able to do that. So I don't think that it's a straightforward answer to defining who a man is. This has evolved from years, from when, being a man was just about power and wealth and status, to when being a man was about your ability to have courage to go to war. Talk about in the 1940s when we started seeing like a lot of wars around the world. That was what it meant to be a man. And then we started getting to a point where being a man is just about building organizations and leading it. And then now we're getting to a point where being a man is about, being able to take care of the family, your home, so things have evolved and individuals are different. And as a result, you can't label being a man and say, oh, just slap a label on it and you say, oh, this is what it means to be a man. It's a difficult thing to comment on, I think. But in my opinion, I think that being a man, at least for me or for the new generation man, is being able to first have a solid understanding of the society in which you live in, and then being able to proactively contribute to moving that society forward. So if it is your immediate family, for instance, understanding the individuals in your family, the wife, the children, the parents, and everybody, and then being able to proactively contribute meaningfully to moving them forward. So it's either you're thinking about how you're going to support your wife, or maybe when she's pregnant, she needs to still get her job done, and you then need to like take some time off to then be able to be there to support her. That is being a man. Or at your organization, for instance, you understand that certain issues that you need to plan for, and then you can proactively begin to give ideas or work on stuff that could help solve those scenarios just in case they happen. Those things are being a man. So I guess thinking about your society, understanding it, and meaningfully contributing to it in such a way that it moves things forward could be my own definition of it.
Thank you very much, Femi. I think that's an interesting point. I like how there was a divergence of thoughts and then you converged from your personal experience and define what being a man is. But I'm wondering what Yemisi thinks about that. So Yemisi, Femi has said that being a man is, he gave these performance-based definitions, just identifying problems in society and going to solve it, solve the woman's problem, solve your children's problem. As a feminist, Yemisi, what do you think about that?
First of all, I'm going to agree with Femi that you can't slap something on someone, and nowadays I'm very strong on the opinion that you can be more than one thing. So like Femi said, I don't have to be this, I don't have to be that. So at the bottom of it, I'm like tying it all together. I think what being a man is, being a person is responsibility. So for me, like now, obviously I'm not a man. So from like a woman's perspective, they think of a man and think responsibility. And then there's responsibility in like different facets. Different women will see responsibility as different things. So like me now, as I've evolved, I don't just see responsibility as provision. Like the traditional woman of before would see responsibility as provision, being able to provide for my family. Another woman could see it as protection. Okay, maybe this man should be big. If armed robbers come, you should be able to take them, that kind of thing. Now, and like Femi said, the 21st century man is moving more towards responsibility as being able to be a father to your kids, take care of your home, not be a hard guy per se. Because those other definitions of like responsibility was all like, oh, early in the morning, wake up, go to the streets, fight, and bring food back home for your family. But now it's no longer that, because women have risen to the occasion to also be fighters and go outside and bring in money. So if your identity is tied to just that responsibility of bringing in things, of course you'll be triggered when the woman goes out to find money. So now she's like, is that what makes a man? Because if you are defining it by those standards, now the woman has become the man, if you kind of understand what I'm saying. So it's just like responsibility in different facets. You see a man and you think responsibility, faithfulness. Like now, like when people say, oh, that's an irresponsible man, he can come in different ways. He may be bringing in money, but he's unfaithful to his wife. So that makes him irresponsible. Or he may be faithful to his wife, but every day he goes out to go and drink in a bar and comes on drunk, and then they call him irresponsible. So from like different people's definitions, I think responsibility is what's at the center of it all.
Okay, responsibility. Thank you very much, MC, for that. And I think you said something interesting that I want to hinge on. So you said being a hard guy. So Morakinya, you see that one of the signs that a word has started to lose its meaning is that you then need to add qualifiers to retain its depth and significance. So today you hear things like a real man, it's a man's man, it's an alpha male, it's a macho man. Why do all these amalgamations exist? Like, why is it not enough to just be a man?
So thank you very much for that. And I'll try to do a lot of things that my fellow panelists have said so far. So I'll take us back a bit to what being a man is, and I'll split it in two things. So firstly, there's the sex element to it, what you're born as, which you have very little control on. And then there's the societal construct of gender, which is where most of the problems lie, where you then start to fall in within one of two confines, right? So I then start to define based on what society deems as being okay, I start to define what a man should be, which ties very closely into what Yemisi said about, women now go out to fight. it's a societal construct that the man should not fight, right? But as we all know, these things have started to evolve significantly beyond that. In the past, being a man was being assertive, being dominant and domineering, but we're starting to evolve beyond that, right? I believe those constructs were there because it just made it easier for society to operate in certain scenarios, right? Where you then know that, oh, this, and this is delegated to this individual because of his gender and because these are the qualifiers for that gender. But we know very well that the world has started to evolve beyond that, right? Work in itself has started to evolve beyond the confines of what you define a man to be. And we're now starting to see that even women are able to do more of those things. So what then happens to those constructs? So in my opinion, I feel those constructs were there just because it was easier for society to operate that way.
I mean, so I guess the issue I would like you to clear with that is that me as a man, my definition and meaning comes from what the society needs at a particular point in time. Why can't I have my own understanding and personal definition of what a man is? Why do I have to be a man dependent on what society wants from me?
Great question, which is why I'm glad we're having this conversation today, right? I believe regardless of your sex or your gender, everyone wants to be an individual, right? To be who you are and to be accepted for the things you like, the things you want to do, without necessarily running at that risk of otherism, but within the general definition of what a man should be, and even within the confines of a man to other men, because there's also that issue. So I believe the more we have these conversations, the more these confines can then start to expand to accommodate for things that would conventionally accepted as being a man, as well as things that these conversations have started brought up to then expand what the scope is.
I mean, thank you, but nonetheless, I think that's a very good point, and we're actually going to come back to that as to what men want, what they want to become, and the hindrances to that, whether it's what society wants from me at a particular time, or what is obtainable at a particular time. But I see that our conversations are sort of geared towards a family man. Osita, I am not married. I do not have any wife to take care of. I do not have any children to take care of. So as a single man, what does it mean for me to be a man? I'm not sure I understand from the context of taking care of my wife and taking care of my family and responsibility in that sense.
Okay, I was hoping that I would piggyback off what Muraki was saying, but okay. So for me, I think that, I don't know if you can hear me, man.
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay, that's great. So I think that being a man as a single person is very different from being a man as maybe a man that is married and with children. The social expectations are very different. For the single man, it's almost as though your entire life is supposed to be geared towards the preparation for the responsibility that is ahead of you. It's typically that way. In some Igbo families in the past, I don't know whether it's still done today, they used to prefer to send the male children to school than the female children, because they feel that the man will go to school, probably get a degree, get a job, and be able to support the family as well as his own family, whereas the woman is expected to look pretty, get married. But society is evolving with more advancement both in technology, the way people see things and access to information has changed the way a whole lot of things are done. But as a single man, you're constantly under that pressure because you know that those responsibilities are there and that you just have to try to figure out how best to position yourself to get ready for what's ahead of you. The man is the one that goes propose to a woman and say, oh, I want to marry you. The woman doesn't do that to a man. That's not the social construct.
But sister, that's a controversial point. I see MEC raising her eyebrow. I don't know. Are you sure you want to continue with that point?
But yeah, so I think that the idea that the man has responsibilities ahead is sort of what drives him. He has to think about that even when he's in school. If he's thinking about his grades, he has to think about how can he make good grades so that he can be able to come out, maybe get a job or be able to leverage his degree to do something for himself. Why that is also the same for women as well. But I think for a young man in Nigerian society that is unmarried or single, because some people have baby fathers, they will have baby mamas. So I mean, you have to really think about what do you want to do. Sometimes you might even be the first son or whatever. So there's even your own immediate family, the immediate family that you eventually have with your wife and so on. So you have to think about what you can do to contribute to the growth of your own family. And then sometimes there's the responsibility of family for the family name, all that. So there's a lot of added pressure. Being a man first is able to figure a way to like manage all the competing priorities while still remaining sane.
Yeah. Osita, thank you for that point. Actually, I think that if that's one thing I can take from what each and every panelist has said, it's like there's a correlation between being a man and responsibility, and actually taking up that responsibility and actually living up to that responsibility. So I guess it's making me wonder now, and I think this goes to you, Yemisi, particularly since you are raising your eyebrow when Osita said a man proposes to a woman and not the other way around. So I guess that typically a man would want to propose to a woman, right? And I think it's because of all these expectations from society and sense of responsibility. So how does the definition of a man affect what men want? We're not necessarily talking about what men want in this case, but I guess I'm wondering the definition of a man, how does it affect and influence what men want? For instance, proposing to females and not females proposing to them.
So defining a man as any of these things will definitely affect what they think they want in quotes. Because if you growing up and you see they tell the regular statement of man up or do this, don't cry, get up, move on, like expectations are already on you. So even if you didn't want these things from the job, like now I have a friend that he wants to be a house husband with all of his heart. Like he actually really likes kids and he does not like the traditional 9 to 5, and he's looking for a babe that is ready to take care of him. So he will stay at home and like stay with the family. But then that kind of opinion is very unpopular one. And then it's not an opinion you could have had, like, let's say in like earlier generations, because that was not what was prevalent. So as much as we may try to run from it, society is what defines what you want. You may not know it, knowingly or unknowingly, because of the society you've grown up in, because of the generation you were born to. More Gen Z men may want to be house husbands as compared to like millennials or like baby boomers, because all the things that you've seen in your environment is going to affect how you think or what you want. At the end of the day, if you dig deep down inside, it may not have been what you wanted from the start, but then because of your generation. And it goes the other way around to say that a lot of men in this our current generation still want to be the macho man, maybe don't want their wives to go to work, maybe want to be able to provide for their family alone. But then when they hear of what the modern woman thinks the modern man should be, it's a family man, somebody that's willing to like break down their emotions, somebody that's willing to cry in front of them. So those things start to influence what they want. So even deep down, if they want to be the traditional man, when they go outside, they have to package so as to be in line with what society wants them to.
Yeah, I think that's a very good segue to actually the main topic of today. And I think I'm going to come to Femi. Femi, what do men want? And I'm not talking about men generally, because I imagine that humans as well as men, our needs and wants, they are complex and they are contradictory. So I do not want you to speak for all men. I'm talking to Femi Akinshe in this moment. What does Femi Akinshe want? Do you want to be a house husband as Yemisi's friend? Or is there something else? What do you want?
So there are many things that anyone could want, and me, for instance, there are many things that I would want politically, for instance, economically. What do I want is different from what I want maritally, you know. So there are many things. If I were to break my life down, perhaps we'll not leave this place. But the first thing I'll say before I get to that question, and this is pretty important for me to just mention, is that society. So Murakiyo and Yemisi did mention how society influences how individuals are, and it's very important for us to drill down on it, because you will notice that currently in the world, you know, in the Western world, in developed countries of Europe and America, like a lot of the modern men are much more familiar, if I were to borrow that word, you know, they are much more they want to stay at home, like modern men, I mean, you know, and they work like they detest the whole traditional 9 to 5 where you wear like a suit and you hold a briefcase. You know, they want to be able to put their kids trolleys in the middle of the road. But this doesn't necessarily affect African men. for instance, because the society that we currently still live in, what we see still influences how you think. Our parents, the people around us, still expect men to be in a certain way. So if you decide, for instance, I just removed my hair. I used to be on braids. I just took it out yesterday.
For the session?
No, not for the session.
Okay.
Yeah, but if I had brought it to the session, regardless of the fact that the majority of people that are here, are young and much more forward thinking or progressive in a sense. Maybe not that the older people are not forward thinking, but young in a sense, different from like the traditional group. Regardless of that, a lot of people are still going to probably look at me as like, what's wrong with this guy? Like, because the societal thing still affects all of us. So we have to keep that at top of mind, that when we're thinking about what men want, we are already biased by our society. Our opinions are already colored by society. So back to what Femi wants. Femi wants to eat and sleep. I mean, I guess that in the sense, if I were to speak in the sense of like, the family and what I want from myself as an older man, I guess it's just to be able to pay much more attention to what is private to. Do you get what I'm saying? So traditional men, especially the older generation, the 70s men and the 80s men and the 60s men, there's this expectation that society has placed on them for them to actually think more about the world, the larger environment, and that's okay. That's great. You have to be, you have to care about your society, care about your environment. But I want to be able to first think about Femi and Femi's family. Before society then begins to say, oh, go and do this, or go and become the president, or go and I really don't care about that. Like, it's not like I don't care, but the first thing that I care about is to be able to immediately tend to the needs of myself and to be able to tend to the needs of my family in a way that I consider okay. So for instance, if I want my kids to go to a certain kind of school, I want to be able to make that decision without anybody saying, oh no, that's not what you're expected to do. No, I want to do it because I want to have that, that. And I believe that we had a conversation one time where I did mention that, the fortunate, or rather maybe unfortunate, as a result of the fact that there's a lack of understanding thing here, is that this is exactly the same thing that women want.
Okay.
That ability to make decisions of your own without that overarching expectation, even though the expectation is going to be there. I don't want that to be the reason why I'm making decisions. So I guess that's the way, that's primarily what I want, to be able to make my own decisions by myself, no matter what that decision is, insofar as it doesn't negatively affect society, it doesn't negatively affect other people around me. I should be able to make it,
Yeah, Femi, I think I'm envious of your wife right now, because it feels like you're a focused man that knows what he wants, and I really like the angle you are taking it from, and I think the audience actually agrees with me. And I think at this point, I also want to encourage every person that is just joining us. Thank you very much for honoring our invitation. It's going to be a very rich conversation, as you've seen, obviously. And like I said, this panelist session is going to be different from others in that we're going to take questions on the fly. So you don't need to wait to the end of the session before you drop a question. So you can actually drop your questions, as we are talking, and we'll actually answer them. So thank you very much for that perspective, Femi. Morakinyo, I want to know what Morakinyo wants. Morakinyo Adejari, what do you want? Do you want to eat and just chill? You want giveaway? Is there something you want?
All right, thanks. So I like all the points that have been raised so far, especially around society and how it conditions us into thinking, oh, this is what we want, or rather, this is what we should want. Meanwhile, if you dig down deeper, it's just really a construct, right? It's not necessarily what you want, or maybe it's what you want that puts you in a certain box, right? That makes you more acceptable to people. What I want as an individual is to want the other without being seen as weird, right? To be able to do the kind of work I want to do, right? Without being seen as, oh, that's not what a man should be doing. To be able to choose what I decide to do with my time, regardless of my gender, right? You'd hear things like, oh, men don't do this kind of work. What if that's what I love to do? Men don't wear this kind of colors. What if I love this kind of color, right? these are not necessarily things that are harmful to my existence. So why shouldn't I be able to do them? Because society has said that, oh, this is not the conventional thing a man should be able to like, right? So for me, really, it's being able to do those things that I feel more comfortable being able to do, regardless of what society says I should be able to do or not do. Right? I don't want to be reduced to just the gender, like, oh, other men do not do this. Other men do not drink this kind of drink. I was out with my girlfriend one time and I caught myself, right? So I ordered a drink on the menu that I didn't know what it looks like, only for it to get to me and it was a pink cup, right? It was a pink looking kind of cup, right? And in that moment, I was a bit triggered, not because I didn't like the drink, but because I felt the way the cup looked would have, put me off in a certain kind of way. So it took me correcting myself firstly to then think of the fact that, wait, I actually enjoy this drink. Why should I be so worried about what people think about me from seeing me holding this kind of a cup? So, it's being able to just be yourself and to be vulnerable without being looked at as being weak, and then being able to express certain emotions, at least within your safe spaces, in a way that you will not be judged as, oh, this person is weaker, or this person is not a man in the conventional terms of being a man. So for me, that's what being a man is, to be more, to be able to be expressive and to like the things you like, provided they fall into the criteria of the things Femi mentioned earlier, that it is not negatively impactful to, the society or to other people around me. I think if once anything checks any of those two boxes, if you like it, you like it, regardless of what gender you are. So that's what being a man is for me.
Thank you very much. Okay, go on. Yeah.
I actually like pink, right? So
okay,
please just word out to anybody, right? If you catch me wearing pink, I'm not going to tolerate slander. I love it.
Yeah, and on the topic of being expressive, I know in general, not to be stereotypical or anything, I think from the way society has put it, more girls are more excited about their birthdays. When the girl's birthday is coming up, it's all over their Instagram, all over that stuff. So today I saw something on Instagram and a man was saying something like, if I ever catch any guy posting a countdown to his birthday on the story, like, that's so weird. Like, what's wrong? Like, it's my birthday. I have a birthday. If I want to shout about it, I should be able to. And there was a trend one time of women and girls posting up the things they want on their birthday. They will have like a really long list of, I want this, Anonymous should get me this on my birthday. And then men aren't allowed, not to use word allowed now, men aren't seen as to do those kind of things, because they're like, why should a man be posting up what he wants? And he should go outside and work for what he wants, and then he should buy what he wants. I think those things are detrimental to men and detrimental to women as well, because that person is implying that women should not work and men should come and give all the money they worked for to women, which is what Femi was trying to say. I don't want to have to use my money to do that. I want to use my money to take care of me. So why is society putting that expectation on me?
Thank you very much, MC, for that point. I think, Osita, I was actually wondering, I just wanted to know you, Osita, just briefly, other than freedom, Mo has mentioned, and the whole framework Femi has given us think around this. Just, what do you want, briefly?
Well, when you say I shouldn't talk about freedom, I mean, what most men want is some form of freedom or the other.
So you want freedom as well?
Yeah, but maybe not the freedoms that they talked about. Maybe my own form of freedom. Like in my family, I'm like the only son. I'm 8 children. I have 7 sisters, and it's interesting, very interesting. Then I have 2 older sisters that haven't gotten married yet, but I'm the only one that my parents ask what's happening.
Time is running.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting because the typical social construct is to assume that people would be asking the woman, oh, when I get married because of menopause and all that. But they seem to have forgotten that they have other older people. It's only me that they disturb in the house, right? And for me, I think the real reason is really because they're like, oh, you're like the only son, what are the family name, blah, blah, blah. So that's a lot of unnecessary pressure, right? I have a lot of things that I personally want to do. And sometimes when you're thinking about what you want to do and you're thinking about what your family expects of you and then what your people expect of you, it can bring a lot of conflicting realities. It really
Okay.
can. And the more you try to pursue your own freedoms to do the things that you want to do and not really pay much attention to what they're saying, you start to feel isolated
Yeah.
within your
Yeah.
own home and within your own family. So
Yeah.
for me, I think that the freedom to be able to just choose and do what I want to do and not be confined by what people expect of me, whether in the family or in the wider society or even the community. I think that for me is what to me to be a man. The freedom to just do exactly what I want to do and settle down when I want. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Osita, for that point. Let me see. A lot of women cannot figure men out. They are like, these guys, they are just so difficult to figure out. I think they've even come to the conclusion that men, they do not know what they want. So I just want to ask, let me see, are you in that camp that believes that men do not know what they want or not? And whatever reason you have, why?
Not just me, a lot of people don't know what they want. And like when I was having a conversation with someone else prior to this, a lot of people know what they don't want, but then they don't know what they want. So yeah, I think I'm going to subscribe that. So a lot of times you don't know what you want until you start seeing it with other people and be like, oh my God, I want this. This person looks at peace. I want what this person has. And this still boils down to what you want, being influenced by what's around you. So at the end of the day, men, they want a whole spectrum of things. And every man, as unique as they look like, wants something different, entirely different. So you can't all put them and say, oh, men don't know what they want, men know what they want. They know that they want something, but maybe perhaps they're not just clear yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
And you know,
That's right. Okay.
if I
Okay. Go on,
just
Femi.
also add a little to that, right? That is actually okay. That is part of the freedoms we're
and
talking
that's
about.
fine, exactly.
Yeah, you know, the pressure that society puts on men, and because of we're on the topic of men, but this also applies to women, right? But that pressure allows for a lot of men to fall into depressive states and then come out with a front, you know, to look like, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. Because society expects it's okay for you not to know what you want. There are a couple of people who at 40 don't exactly know what they want, right? Figure things out and be allowed to figure things out. Because you know, when we then allow, which is this is yes, not something a lot of us can run away from. But when we allow society's pressures to then make us begin to make certain decisions, you get the statistics that we always see that we have a lot more men that are depressed than women, or we have a lot of men who commit suicide than women. Why would that happen? If you haven't figured your life out, it's not such a bad thing, you know?
Okay. So Femi, I
I
think. Okay.
I
Sorry, Mo.
absolutely agree with Femi.
Okay, I just wanted to say,
Uh,
just make a point briefly because I think what Femi said, and you are agreeing to it, is controversial because some people in our audience are actually opposed to it. So I think before I speak on what the member of the audience have put on the chat box, I just want to encourage members of the audience. If you have a question, please use the Q and A box. The chat box is just to engage each other and just keep the conversations going. I'm going to keep tabs with the chat box and Q and A's. But if you have questions, just drop it in the Q and A. But nonetheless, I think I got a comment from Timmy Lane Shodia. He says that I think what we want is heavily influenced by society. And I think what Femi said about you are 14 and you don't know what you want, it's fine. How sustainable is that? How should I have a father that's 40 years old and he doesn't know what he wants? I need a sense of direction from this man. How do I have an uncle or an elder person that I want a sense of clarity from and they do not know what they want? So I guess there's a balance with what you want and what's sustainable and what's actually viable in a particular point in time. So I just want to know what more you think about this.
okay, so firstly, I'll speak to the first
Yeah.
conversation that was going on around people not knowing what they want.
Okay.
So I like the perspective of, oh yeah, it's easier when you see it and then you identify with the fact that, oh, I would want that too. But I think it's also important to start to teach people that it's okay to want certain things that they probably want, but do not know whether it's acceptable or not to want those things.
Okay.
Like the whole bit of embracing uncertainty, which is what I think Femi is bordering on. Right? It's okay sometimes to not know, right? But society has taught you that at all times you need to know your next 3 to 10 steps. You need to know this, you need to know that. which is what forces people into depression states, truly, right? But being able to then start to teach people that it's okay to actually talk about these things, right? It's okay to not know. It's okay to ask for help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that I struggled with for many years, not being able to ask for help because you don't know what, because I had a sense of what society saw that as, oh, it's a sort of weakness, you not knowing what to do next. And it made me more reclusive, right, in being able to ask for help. So I think there is a part to play in actually being able to teach people more and more that you need to know that, oh yes, society has said this for years, but it's actually okay to want this. It's okay to not want this. If you do not mind, can you just repeat your last question so I can then take on that?
Oh yeah, so I was saying that how sustainable it is, like how sustainable is it to not know what you want as a man? As a family man, you have your wife, you have your children. How sustainable is it to not have a sense of direction and a sense of what to do? You're at 40 and you have people looking up to you. Why is it okay to not know what you want? How
So,
sustainable is it?
so personally, I don't want to be in those shoes of being 40 years old and not knowing what to do, right? But before your gender, before your sex, if you abstract before that, you're human. And to
Mm-hmm.
be human is to be imperfect. To be human is to not know everything, right?
Okay.
We are the sum total of all of our life experiences. That's not to say that at certain points in time, you will not experience points in your life where you don't actually know what to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can happen to anybody. Hopefully not at 40, right? But if it does happen, it's okay. You're
Okay.
human. You would figure it out, right? The work to be done, I think the crime at that point is to then just accept your circumstances that, you know what, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to wallow in this. The strength is in knowing that you do not know what to do and then being able to pick yourself up to then either seek help or look for the right source of help or the solutions to whatever it is that you know you are facing at that point in time. So I don't think not knowing what to do is the issue here. It can happen to anyone. I know there are people in their 60s that encounter not midlife crisis, later life crisis, right? You have to
Yes.
figure it out. You
Yes.
have
Yes.
to, right?
Yes. Yes.
You don't get to choose when you encounter these things. They
Mm-hmm.
happen anyway. So the work is then being able to know that, oh, it's okay. The work to be done is figuring out what to do next. I think
Yes.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yes, thank you so much, Marakim. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think another angle I want us to actually think around it is, let's take the case study of the 40-year-old man with a family that doesn't know what he wants, right? So even though we argue that before all of that, before he was a father, before he was a husband, he's human, and it's fine. In humans, we are not perfect, and so there are times when we have all this crisis and all of that. So when he's going through this problem, he's not going through it in isolation, right? So the family members are affected, his wife is affected, and all of that. And it still boils down to what we keep saying about how your definition as a person, as a man, is heavily influenced by society, right? And I think that that's what some of our audience they've actually been hinging on. So it's like, how do we separate who a man is from what society wants? How do you separate who a man is from what society wants? And in to follow up from this, I think Tochi Ebere asked the question. So the question is, outside of societal constructs, are there innate tendencies that men have and women don't? So Tochi is taking us out of the realm of what society wants and all of that, using to define men and all of that. And it's making us think about it from the biological perspective. And I think Uzogo Kingsley raised the point in the chat box where he said, are we trying to say now that what society wants from men trumps what biologically a man is? So I think if our feminists in the house, Yemisi, I would actually like you to actually jump on this. So at the outside of societal construct, are there innate tendencies that men have and women don't?
And this is just my perspective here. No, I don't think there are any tendencies that are particular to sex. Because I saw someone in the chat box raise this question about the difference between sex and gender, and I completely agree. Sex is biological reality. You were born with these sexual organs. You are classified as a man. Then gender is a social construct of what is influenced by society and how you've grown up. So yes, I completely agree with that point that sex and gender can be two different things. But like following up from that, I don't think because I'm a particular sex, there are some innate tendencies that I have that are particular to only me? Who says that? Who made the rules? That is because of what society has seen that you think that men are supposed to be more macho. Men should be the ones fighting. There's no such rule. If as a woman I wake up one day and say yes, now I would like to be a fighter, there's no innate tendency that is spiraling that is different from what's in a man and different from what's in a woman. So on that note, no, I don't think there are any innate tendencies per se.
Okay. Osita, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off what Yemisi was saying about not having any special innate tendencies. The idea is that the social construct makes it very difficult for people to just be themselves. For example, the woman that is assertive is seen as aggressive, while the man that is assertive is seen as confident. The exact same behavior, different perceptions, right? So it's not like there's an innate tendency that makes the man more confident. It's not like there's an innate tendency. It's just simply perception. The woman is working very hard, and they're like, oh, okay. And then you find out that someone that works very hard, that has the same grade with the guy, gets to take a more or a lesser role in the same organization when they both have the same qualifications. And sometimes they are paid differently, even though they are both qualified the same. Why? Because society probably expects that the man probably has more responsibilities, which is not actually true, because you don't know where the woman is coming from. You don't know how many siblings that are depending on her, which is like our current social realities, because the period when men were seen as the only people that had financial responsibilities has passed.
Yeah,
So
Osita, before you go on, I actually just want to draw you back, because I think that we are still talking about societal expectations, you see. So the question was on biological differences, right? So are there biological differences that influence what men want outside of what society demands from men? And I think, Femi, I get a feeling you want to jump on this.
Yeah, I'm not that guy. I wanted to jump on it. And I don't know if Osita wanted to finish his thoughts or something. But it was just a disagreement, slightly, with the statement made by, or a couple of opinions that Yemisi shared. So some of the things she said are absolutely correct, which is that fundamentally speaking, really, there's no difference between men and women. And I actually absolutely loved that Osita mentioned that there are certain behaviors that men exhibit that when they do exhibit, society sees as acceptable. They say you're confident, for instance, if you are, and if you're a woman, they say you're rude or you're disagreeable or not agreeable. So, but the truth is, there are still fundamental differences that are generated from the sexual the sex itself, the anatomical makeup of men that makes the behavior of men sort of different in a sense than women. And maybe that influences what men want, maybe not. I don't think I have like an absolute opinion on that. But what I know is that there are specific chemistry in the male anatomy that allows for men to behave in a certain way. For instance, aggression for men is a little bit much more than that of women. And that is not because men are supposed to be aggressive, women aren't supposed to be aggressive. It is driven by some chemical components, chemical components in the human brain that allows for people to behave in certain ways. There was an article I read sometime when it was saying something about how women depend a lot on neoprene or something like that. I think maybe Moraki will be able to give us the specific terms, because a lot more of those things. There are still these specific chemical components in the human brain that drives behavior. And so it drives the women to behave in a certain kind of way that is perceived as different from the way a man would behave. Maybe I'm not a medical professional, but that is not to say, and this is just very important to note, that is not to say that certain behaviors should be accepted when men do them and should not be accepted when women do them. No, that is to say that it should be understood that there are instances when somebody will behave in a certain way that you wouldn't see with the majority of other people of a different gender. And if you read a little, you will know that, yes, these differences are there, but they shouldn't be the basis upon which I guess is what Yemisi's argument is, the basis upon which humans then perceive each other. So if I am a naturally aggressive person, that is not to say I should be violent, or that's not to say, oh, I should use my aggression in a sense to lord over other people. It could just be as a function of some increase in some form of chemical components that allows for that to happen. And which is something that differentiates men and women sexually, like in terms of sexes, but not necessarily in the sense of how or what their output in society is, or what they are, what they can generally do. But to say that there are no differences at all, I'm not sure I quite agree with that.
Okay.
Okay. I think I was chiming in here.
No. Let me see. I think before you make your point, I really would love for you to make your point, and I see you are itching too. But I'd actually really love for Mo to make his point first. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a controversial response to this as well.
Yeah.
Firstly, there are no absolutes. To say that one or the other does not influence in any way, I don't agree with, right?
Okay.
I think what we should pay attention to here is, on a biological level, there are fundamental differences. Now, what these fundamental differences do is they enhance, or there are more predispositions that enhance certain behaviors if a person is nurtured that way. So that's the role biology plays in it. That if you wanted to behave this way, your biological makeup kind of enhances or predisposes you to behaving that way more than the other person based on your sex. Now, how you then choose to behave is where the societal constructs comes in. If you take a look at the a child's brain, take a boy, take a girl from when they were just born, their brains are exactly the same, right? Now, when you start to see a change, it's actually after you start to nurture that child based on what you say or what society says their gender is. The more you start to train the boy as, oh, you need to be strong, you need to be able to fight, you need to be able to chop wood. And the more you raise the girl as, oh, you need to be able to wash plates, you need to be able to cook, the more the morphology or anatomy of their brains then start to change to accommodate for those things. Now, that's not to say that the genetic makeup of both sexes does not enable or predispose them to acting a certain way more. For a guy, because of your genetic or your hormonal makeup, chances are that if you are predisposed to more violence, chances are that you can exhibit such tendencies more than a female. Now, that's not to take away from the fact that anyone can do anything really, but it's not to take away from the fact that your genetic makeup, in some instances, in some scenarios, can predispose you or enhance certain behaviors more. I just thought to clarify on that.
Thank you very much for that. Yemisi, I think Mo gave us a sort of balance here, and there are no absolutes here and there. I think he has taken out any form of imbalance from the statements. I think we're still going to come back to this, but I'd really love us to answer some questions that are actually coming up. So Name says, I don't think that there should be a universal definition of man, because it implies that it implies that there are real men who fall in line with the definition and those that do not fall in line with definition. So those that do not fall in line with the definition, what do we call them then? I hope you guys got that question. So we have a definition of what men are, or society's definition of what men are. So if you do not fall under that definition, what are you? Are you a ma, without the N, or are you an without the M? Or something.
The same thing we've been talking about. You are the same as the man. You are exactly the same thing. That societal expectation or that societal construct that is what we're trying to break down or sort of demystify. Like what men should want should be what they want, not what society wants. That's what we're talking about.
I know, and we keep having this conversation, on how to strike a balance. And I think that Emmanuel Uzim's question actually hinges on this. So he says that, not knowing what you want does not necessarily mean that you cannot provide for your family, or you cannot pay your school fees, or you've not had a successful life. So he feels like there's a divergence. So it doesn't necessarily mean that at 40 you don't know what you want. It does not mean you cannot kiss out for your family. Osita, I'd really love for you to speak on this, because I see the way you're nodding your head. You're very excited about that point.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Well, Yeah, so he's very correct. Not really knowing what you want doesn't mean that you don't go ahead to actually have a successful career. I mean, I know people that have been doing law for the past 5 years because I graduated from law school and all, and they're doing pretty okay. They're doing pretty okay. Some of them are married, but they don't find any joy in the work that they do. And you'd be surprised how good they are at their job, but they don't find any joy in what they do. They just see it as a job and they try to put in their best, and that's it. So fast forward 2-3 years from now, this guy might just go to the village and start doing poetry or something. And people would think he's crazy, but like, I mean, that might just be what the person just wants to do. So, but it doesn't mean that maybe while he was still trying to figure out what he really wanted to do, that he didn't take care of his family or meet his other social responsibilities. It might just simply mean that he hadn't yet found exactly what he wanted to do.
Thank you very much. And I think that speaks to, sorry, go on. I'm sorry, finish that thought.
I wanted to give the example of the guy that founded KFC. I think he was around 60 something or 70 something when he started KFC. I mean, he had lived a full life.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
KFC. So that shows that he probably had this feeling to start something like that for a very long time, but eventually now started when he was at that age, and he still succeeded. So
thank you very much for that point. And I think that still speaks to the point of freedom that we spoke about. So men should have the freedom to want what they want and pursue it without any form of judgment or repercussions or all of that. And I think that when we spoke about, being at 40 and not knowing what you want, I guess it was based on the assumption that probably every man wants to, provide for his family. Every man wants to take care of his wife and all of that. So it's like, if you're not sure of that, then it's a problem. But I think it's still a valid point that at 40, you are doing all these things. You might not necessarily feel a sense of satisfaction. You might not know what you want. And I think what you said now, Osita, about, a founder of KFC starting very late, it sort of ties to what Mrs. I said. So Mrs. I says, hi, nice discussion. Thank you, ma. Would you prescribe, when would you prescribe would be the right time to start knowing what you want and initiating an action plan to try to bring this to life? When would be the right time to start knowing what you want? Murakiyo, do you want to tell us something?
All right. So, if I was to speak from a personal point of view, I'll say as early on as possible, because then you have more time to figure things out as they occur when you proceed, right? But there's also a saying that, now when I might get it wrong now when your sun rises, now when you something like that, that's when your morning starts.
No, it's like you have a problem speaking pidgin English. I don't know. Is there do men not want to speak pidgin?
you get the general idea.
Yeah, I do.
Best case scenario, right? And I think it's best to always have that sense of the different scenarios in mind. Best case scenario is, and there are people that I know that they're that way, that from the outset it seems like they have it all figured out. They know what they want to do at a certain age, they know what they need to be doing at that point in time, they know who to be speaking with, and by chance or by luck or by sheer will, they're in the circles that enhance those things to happen, right? There are such people, right? That's not to take away from the fact that there are other people that really do not know and they're just figuring it out on the go, right? Who am I to say that is wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's a thing of them being true to yourself, being self-aware enough to know that this is my current reality. I am at age X. I have this figured out, but I do not have this figured out. What do I need to make that situation change? It's in being aware that I think we're then able to start to discover what it is we actually want and what we do not want, and then being actually true to yourself, because there's a part that plays, right? There's a very high chance that this person who is 40 years old, who is confused and is at the crossroads, who does not know what to do, has probably ignored the signs for many years, that have been hinting that this is probably what you love to do. This is probably the circles you want to be in. But maybe because of the societal constructs for many years and what he has been taught that is being right, has just accepted that, you know what, those are just feelings. I should probably not explore that. And then that piles up and gets you up to a point where, you just can't help it anymore. And then you get to that point where you fit into the description of, you are this age, but you don't know what to do next, or you don't know how to figure it out. So, and I guess it's also a message to the younger folks like us, to be more self-aware from now. Don't wait until you're 40 to start exploring those inclinations that you've always had. You don't know, that just might be where you make it. That it might be where you break it. You're allowed to fail as well. Figure it out on Google. But as to when is the right time for a person to figure it out, I think it's just you being true to yourself in the current state of your journey, right? Whether you're young, whether you're old, so then being able to start to be true to yourself, evaluate your situation, and then figure out what to do next. Provided it falls within the definition of safe, it's not harmful to you, it's not harmful to society, it's not detrimental in any way. Why not?
Thank you very much, Marakio. So there's a misnomer there. So it's Ifoma Idibe, not Mrs. I. It's Ifoma Idibe is Mrs. I's cousin. Apparently, they have the same name. Hi, Ifoma Idibe. Thank you very much. So let me say, I actually want you to take Ifoma Idibe's second question. So you know how women say, he's not a real man, he's still a boy. So at what point do we transition from being boys to men? It's like, should just married people be called men, or are there definitions of men outside of this? Should it be explored from the tabula rasa states, the assigned roles, biological or physiological differences? Should it be also explored like in different ways, outside of just being married?
Okay, I'm just going to agree with what someone said in the comment section before that. The only thing that defines what a man is, which is man as in sex, is your biological structure. That is what makes a man. So you can be anything you want to be. You can be a hairdresser, what people think is not a man, anything at all. It doesn't discredit you from being a man. I think that's where we should start from. Men come in all shapes, colors, sizes, and everything else. So you shouldn't limit yourself based on what you think this is what a man is supposed to be. And by definition, I think going to the boys versus men question, I think a man is just an older boy. Like, that's what it is. I think after you cross your teenage years or something, you become a man. Like, that's what it is. And I generally don't agree with that point of view where people come and say he's not a real man, he's a boy, or he's not. He is a man. He's just not what you think a man should be. First, you should be checking with yourself. So whether he's a man that is up to your standards is what the question is. If he's an older boy, he's a man. So whether he acts a certain way, he's not responsible, whatever it is you think, that's a man. He's not your kind of man. Then move to the next one. Do you understand?
Let me see. One of the things I loved about when we started was that we had a fundamental definition of what a man was. And then I asked you, and then you had told me that it's someone that takes responsibility, right? And so I'm looking at an older boy, and he doesn't take responsibility.
The question is, what does it mean to be a man? And
yes.
Any question, what does it mean to be a man? And I came from the perspective of women that they want responsibility, a responsible man. What it means to be a man is different from what a man is. But trying to ascribe things, you want to say, what does it mean? That's what I think a man should be. But then that's very different from who is a man. A man is an older boy, period. Whether he's like what he wants or what he doesn't want, there's no talk about that.
Okay, Femi, I would like you to comment on that, but once you do, I would also like you to follow up with Fortune's question. Fortune says, so should we liken knowing what you want to attaining fulfillment?
Okay, great. So first, before I comment on that and then I, respond to the question, there's something I just wanted to clear, and this came from those point, which was very brilliant, which is about how, like, when you were talking about when I think from the best question about when should you begin to figure things out. So one important distinction we need to make is that knowing what to do and having the ability to actually get it done are two different things, right? And some people have had the privilege of being, which is what Rakio mentioned when he mentioned that, some people are lucky to have, or lucky or maybe well-positioned to have the things to push them. So I think that society, in a sense, because we don't distinguish correctly, we assume that a lot of people who haven't achieved a certain kind of thing don't know what they want, or don't know what they're doing. But it might not always be as a result of the fact that they don't know what they want. If you see a 40-year-old person, for instance, who hasn't achieved what you expect, not necessarily what they expect, for instance, but what you expect, it doesn't necessarily mean the person hasn't figured life out. It just probably means that the person is not privileged enough to have the catalyst to help them achieve those things. So for instance, maybe they need money to be able to pull their startup off the ground. I mean, all of us here are trying to build something. We know how difficult it is. Maybe those kind of people don't have somebody who can just write you a $10,000 check or a $20,000 check. And then somebody else who is way younger has somebody who's to write them a $10,000 check. That I guess privilege should be recognized and used to distinguish between people who have what it takes to get things done and who have actually figured out what they actually need to do. That's just a distinction I want us to make. Onto the question that Fortune asked, right? So he says, so can we liken knowing what you want to attaining fulfillment? I think that maybe in a sense, yes. And this might not just be an absolute yes, but maybe in a sense, yes. Because so while human wants are insatiable, when you want something and you are able to get it, for the most part, you feel fulfilled. You may then want something else afterwards, but at least in the moment, you achieve some form of satisfaction. So let's assume, basically, I want a bachelor's degree. I just want to go to school, right? And I eventually get a bachelor's degree. In that moment, I will jubilate and celebrate. But while I am pursuing the bachelor's degree, my want might have evolved to now wanting a master's degree. I have not completed my bachelor's degree. And so I might get my bachelor's degree and not feel 100% fulfilled. But at least I'll get some satisfaction that I've achieved something that I want in the past and then move to pursuing other things. So they are interlinked, but then it might just not be absolute because human wants evolve and evolve and evolve.
And that is sanitary. Okay, Mo, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think I like the point about them being interlinked, but maybe not exactly the same. What you want might lead towards your fulfillment, right? But they might not necessarily be the same thing. And I think there's a place in accepting that fulfillment can also evolve, and it's also very personal. It differs for many people, regardless of gender.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mo. So at this point, I just want to thank my audience. I love the way the conversations are going on in the chat box. A lot of philosophical and controversial and very deep perspectives. Let's keep that going and let's please keep the questions coming. So I was going to ask, why are we having this conversation? Because I see there's an interchangeability between what men want and what human wants. So it's like we are mixing it together. So it feels like there are no unique wants for men. So I guess the question is, why do we even need to know what men want? What men want, is it not the same as what all humans want? Or is there something about the unique experiences of men that makes, having a separate conversation about it worthwhile? What's the relevance of having a separate conversation about men? And I want to know what you think about this, Morakian.
Okay, great. I like your point around, in the end, at the core, we're all human, right? But the fault is with society, I would say, in my opinion. Society in itself has made up a binary system where it's written or unwritten that as a man, this is the box you fit into. As a woman, this is the box you fit into. Which is why it is then important to start to have these conversations more and more. Firstly, to educate people, to help certain people learn, and also then unlearn certain things, and then being able to understand that, okay, take away those conformities. In the end, at the core of things, what you want really is to be human. So I wrote down a point where one of us was talking about what it really means to be a man, right? What do men want? In the end, my question to that, which was a counter, is what does it mean to be human? What do you want as a human? Firstly, you want to be successful at what you do. You want to be able to fail without being judged. You want to be accepted for the things you like. You want to be accepted for the things you want to do, right? If you abstract it to any gender, regardless of what gender it is, some of those things still hold true, right? It is society then being able to start to accept that, regardless of your gender, your wants are valid, that your needs are valid, and there are actually no constructs that should prevent you from being able to access that. So in the end, the purpose of this conversation is to start to educate us, to start to help people to learn, like I said, and also learn that, it's okay to be a certain way. It's okay to like certain things. It's okay to want to be in certain circles, right? So in my opinion, that's why I think it's important to have these conversations so that, those thoughts you have at the back of your mind, that make you think that maybe me, I'm not all right. Maybe I'm the other. Maybe I'm different. You can start to then understand that, you know what, this is actually just the norm. It's only human to want certain things. And I think it's only fair to talk about it.
Yeah, Yemisi, I see you giving some affirmative nods, and I actually want to ask you, Yemisi. So, Yemisi, you believe that we should all be feminists, right? And I think inherent in that is an obligation that everyone should have an understanding of the unique problems of women and make a collective effort to solve them. And so, indeed, women have unique problems. So, I want to ask you, Yemisi, who do you think should be responsible for identifying and addressing the issues of men? Should it be men's business alone, or it should be a collective, it should be a collective one?
Nothing can be just one group's business alone. Let me just start from there. Like, even when I say we should all be feminists, I didn't say all women should be feminists. Or to reach a certain goal, it takes collective efforts, because benefits of feminism flow to men, and if an issue affects you directly, there is always the chance that you'll be the first person to rise up, because the others don't understand what you are going through. You can say that men can lead the conversation on what men should want, or what it takes to, like, put menace in quotes. Let me not get into that. But then you can't do anything alone. Men need women to achieve their goal. If more men want people to understand them, it's not only men that are in the world. Other women have to help you push your cause as well, which is why I think I'm here, But like I said, everything takes a collective effort. So you have to come together as a group to chase these things. And like, just to touch a little on what Maraki was saying about what a man wants, and if you talk about a conversation about what a human wants, it's almost going to be looking similar. If you go to a woman's conversation, some of the things that we've talked about today, they are going to show up there as well. The thing is that for men, I don't think it's talked about enough. So like, let's say from like the early 2000s, talks have already started coming up about women should stand up, about women should move for what they want. But then those conversations have helped build women now that are strong career women that are multifaceted. But then a lot of times people don't talk about how men should evolve as these women are evolving. So I think this conversation is important, because you can't just talk to one particular sex and expect things to change. The other people have to be ready for it as well. And the men too also want something that has transitioned with time. So you have to talk about it. So it's in we be more expressive about men's needs too. So then we can find the balance between like the male and female gender.
Thank you very much. I think I just want to build on the point of being expressive. So Osita, let's talk about validation, right? So it's like everyone craves validation, isn't it? So, but let's talk about validation from a man's perspective. So, when you are having struggles as a man, or generally when men are having struggles, when times are difficult for men, what are the sort of things that men want to hear? What sort of validation of your difficulty as a man would you want? Is it man up, you're a lion, or you want to hear it's okay to fail, it's okay, it's fine, or a balance of both?
To be honest, answering that type of question is very difficult, because different strokes for different folks, right? Some people want to be told to man up, you're a lion and all that, and they will keep going. Why some people just want to not be judged because they don't know how to keep going, or because they are scared that they're going to fail, or even the fear of just stopping completely and not going ahead to complete what they've started. There's always that anxiety. You've already started, there's a lot of high hopes, everybody's waiting for you to pull through, and then you realize that this is not what you want to do. Imagine getting to your 6th year in medical school and then you don't want to continue, because you realize that you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life if you actually went ahead. And then in that type of situation, I really don't know whether you want someone to tell you to man up and complete the program. I really don't know, because I mean, it varies across different people. Some people might want you to tell them, oh, that it's okay if they don't want to continue, that whatever decision they make, it's fine, because it's their decision, and that they get the opportunity to still figure it out. So I think that for validation, for me personally, I would want the opportunity to have a clear head to think around what I want to do next. if what I'm currently doing doesn't work out, whether I want to continue or not. But I wouldn't want someone to tell me man up, be a lion, and add more pressure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Osita. So I think that I want us to actually come from the angle of following the conversation around validation. So it's like you as a man, when you're having a problem, do you want to be told man up or all of that, or do you want to be encouraged and all of that? I think a lot of women call that toxic masculinity. So I want us to actually steer the conversation to that angle now. So, Yemisi, how do you define toxic masculinity? And why is there such an affinity? Why do men want to, be associated with traits that people typically, call toxic?
That's a tricky question, because what's toxic to me might not be toxic to like other people. But then I think toxic masculinity is a man, and this is just my definition, a man putting his ego at the center of everything. It's not always all about you. That's what why a lot of women, when they talk about toxic masculinity, they are saying get off your high horse. It's not always about you. Don't put yourself in the center of everything. Women are not trying to look pretty for you. Women are not trying to cook for you. That woman in your office, don't give her the knife to cut cake for you. Like you're not at the center of every decision that other people make. And it's not even just, it's somebody in the chat box one time talked about respect, like men always wanting respect. But then, like she said, respect is reciprocal. You cannot just sit down in the center of your tiny world and then expect things to revolve around you. So I think that's what, when people say toxic masculinity, like that's very toxic. I think some other people, and I'm not sure I really subscribe to that, we think that toxic masculinity is any man that says that a woman should always be under him, a woman should be fighting. Like my own is, a lot of times those men don't really know any better, so it's very harsh to like stamp it. Every man that's like that is toxic. But sometimes some people just need to be cleared once and say, oh, that's not how you do things. Get up and like see things from like a greater perspective. So at the center of it all is putting your ego in like the center of everything. That's what being toxic is.
Thank you very much, MC. I think the reason why I raised this point was because I was reading a CNN publication yesterday, and it talked about the spike in femicide worldwide. So femicide is the murder of women solely because they are women. The article suggests that a closer look at patriarchy, masculinity, and all these things might help solve the problem. So it makes me wonder, what is it about men? Like, what is it about men and asserting their presence in form of dominance? Is this a desire? Is this a want that men want that is influenced by society? Or is this coming from somewhere else? Femi, what do you think about this?
These are difficult questions, Emmanuel. I feel like you set them up on purpose to just balance, but then that's absolutely fine. So first of all, like just to quickly respond, I usually personally have a problem with the term toxic masculinity, because I think that toxicity is toxicity. That's what it is, right? So when somebody behaves in a way that is typically associated with men, and I think is toxic, maybe you call it toxic masculinity. But then there's some other ways that people behave in that are not necessarily associated with men. Maybe they're even associated with women, and the people behave in that way. It doesn't remove the toxicity from it, So toxicity is just toxicity. That's what it is. So if you behave in a way that you think everything revolves around you, whether you're a man or you're a woman, you're behaving in a toxic way. But then if you're a woman, I wouldn't say you are exhibiting toxic femininity, would I? It's still toxicity. So I guess that I just had a problem. I usually have a problem, but I think that. On your question, I don't think that, I think that it's a function of society, and society evolves over and over. And somebody asked a question about evolution right here that I was hoping to respond to as well. So society evolves, and the needs and wants of society evolve as society evolves. So there was once a time when we relied very heavily on human power to be able to get things done. In those days, and biologically speaking, and this may not even always hold true as a matter of fact, but like what we have seen, biologically speaking, men would have like maybe bigger bone mass than women and muscle than women. As a result, can do typically much more physical things than women will be able to do. So because of that, society expected for men to be at the forefront of getting things done, because of course what you needed was physical power, not necessarily mental power, which you really can't differentiate men and women, when it comes to like mental power, even physical power, as a matter of fact, just because of society. So because of that expectation, a lot of the ways that society then structured itself reflects that expectation. From wanting physical men to be the ones to carry stuff, when it got to the point where men were not necessarily carrying stuff again, society transitioned that into, okay, men should lead businesses, or men should build businesses, or men should take care of the family, or men should go to the war, to the war front, or men should get into politics. But it's not necessarily, in my opinion, as a result of an innate desire by men to want to exert dominance. It is more as a result of the way society has evolved and held on to certain things that may not necessarily then be valuable anymore in modern. Do you get what I'm saying? So for instance, in this modern world right now, I really don't see the reason why anybody who works, for instance, with a tech company who is trying to solve a problem for rural Africa somewhere, maybe trying to get them to be much more financially inclusive, to feel like they want to dominate. What do you want? What do you have to do? Like, anybody can write a line of code. A woman can write a line of code. Anybody can design a website. Anybody can build, those things are no longer important. But I guess society still holds on to those old-time values, that then allows for some people to begin to exhibit that. And then, the cultural and societal difference also comes to play. So some of these things we're talking about are mostly in like African societies. Like developed world, these things don't exist like so much anymore. They still do, of course. But then that idea of like one man wanting to dominate over another, like, I don't think it's innate. I think it's just society.
I mean, it's interesting you make that point, because when I was reading the CNN publication, they actually did speak about this femicide being on the rise actually in the Western world. And so, but I think you made some very good points there. And I just want Morakion to build up on that more. What is it about men and wanting dominance and asserting themselves in form of violence? Is it something that culture, religion, society has influenced? Or is there something that we're not seeing?
Okay, thanks. So you mentioned, I think, 3 or 4 categories: culture, religion. Every other thing apart from biology is nurture, right? Which is why I strongly believe that nurture actually plays a very strong role in exhibiting certain traits than nature in a lot of cases. It's not absolute, but I believe that nurture actually plays a very big role. So your nurture is a combination of your culture, your family, your religion, your work, your immediate environment. And maybe we might want to dig a little deeper into these places where you mentioned that the rate of femicide has gone up significantly. You might find that it's a norm in such scenarios that, certain traits are what you expect of a man. And that's how men in that society have been nurtured over the years, right? Where an argument to your face is seen as disrespect, right? And the only way to correct it is either to verbally abuse or physically abuse the person. You might see such traits in such environment. This is not to take away from the fact that there are scenarios where your biological makeup can act as, enhancers to exhibit certain behaviors. But I believe that your nurture, which are these things that I've mentioned, are, play a significant role in then determining what the trends in certain places are. I once saw a documentary of some place in Southern America where, they said it with so much pride during the interview. Every man, we beat our women here. It is the norm. Like, we beat them here. Like, if they misbehave, we beat them. If they don't cook on time, we beat them, right? And it was obvious, and even to the women, that it's not wrong here. They beat us, right? So we know our place, or we know to do this at a certain point in time, and the reward for this is beating, right? Now, in such a place, it's no longer a thing of genetics or your hormones or your gender. It's just the societal construct in that environment. So yes, I believe that it's actually nurture. And I would actually, if I was a betting man, I would bet that if they dug deeper into what is influencing that rise in that region that you mentioned, chances are that it's largely, the society, the construct, how they've been nurtured to, respond to certain things in that environment. And that would be my opinion. I think I would also
Thank
like
you
to
very
touch
much.
on the point of toxic masculinity.
Okay.
Yes, I think it's a very touchy combination of words, toxicity and masculinity. And I guess what people generally refer to as toxic masculinity is exhibiting certain traits as regards the female gender, right? In my opinion, toxicity is general, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are things that can be classified as toxic masculinity because if based on your gender, you believe certain things should not be, or women should not do certain things because they're women, I guess it's termed that, right? But toxicity, in my opinion, I think it's harmful to not just a person of another gender or the next person inside. It's actually harmful to you yourself as well.
Yeah.
In the sense that you hear things like, oh, a man should not say certain things or he shouldn't express certain emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That's toxic to you because the less you're talking about these things, the more you're predisposed to other things that are harmful to you, both health-wise, physically, and then even predisposes you to acting out in certain types of ways. So
Yeah.
I just thought to differentiate that a little bit there.
Thank you very much, Mo.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mo. I think that we're rounding off. I just want to thank everybody for staying with us till this moment. I want us to close on the note of, restrictions of what men want. So there is the issue of expectation versus reality. I imagine that many men do not want to go to war, but they have to, right? So how do we balance what men want today, with what is obtainable? Or what has to shift to accommodate the redefined desires of men? Osita, I would like you to talk about this.
Sorry, can you take the last part of the question again? I didn't quite.
Oh, what has to shift to accommodate these redefined desires of men?
I think that we can't really force the society to change.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that has to happen gradually. And in a fora like this one that we have here, we were having a conversation and talking to quite a number of young people that will go on to change or think around the way that society is and maybe start to figure out what they want to do going forward about the social construct. I think that maybe more forums like this one can also go a very long way in sparking the conversation around what it means to be a man, what men want, and how social pressure should not be applied to people on the basis of gender, so that people can feel a bit more free to express themselves and live out their best lives. So that's what I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Osita. And I think that's a very good segue to the question that Kingsley asked. On the foundation of what, on the built foundation of what men want, does it suffice to say that the definition of women and what they want are complementary to that of men, or vice versa, in order to keep the universe in balance? Or are those elements mutually exclusive? Femi, do you have a thought?
Yes. So first of all, just to add a little something to what Osita said about what needs to be done to see men get the things that they want in society. So like we have all of us here on the panel recognize the fact that we are not so different after all, and so the fact that we're not so different should allow us to think more collaboratively rather than think in silos, which is the reason I guess why we're having this kind of conversation. Because if you notice from the intro, there was something that was said about how there's currently a lot of focus, which is great, on why women need to be much more empowered and why we need to do more for women. But then a couple of the younger generation men, the young boys, are losing out. For instance, like specific opportunities meant for women, which is great, which is very, very great. Like this has to be very pointed out. Like it's very, very great that this opportunity exists. But then some of the younger generation men are now beginning to look like, I wasn't born at the time when women weren't getting these opportunities. Nothing exists for me, So it's important that we begin to think collaboratively on how we can move society forward, because all our problems are similar in many ways. freedom is the biggest thing we have touched on, and freedom is the biggest thing of us want. Freedom to be who we really want. So collaboratively, we can change society. So we think like that, I guess change can begin. If you can just repeat the question so that I can.
On this built foundation of what men want, does it suffice to say that the definition of women and what they want are complementary to that of men in order to keep the universe in balance, or are the elements mutually exclusive?
I'll answer in two ways. First, yes, they are complementary. Like we all have like complementary, I guess, for instance, like procreation, which is like the most basic thing. Procreation only happens because we have complementary. That's the reason why procreation happens. If you think about it that way, some of the things that we have as men complement what women bring, and then what women bring complements what we bring, and that's what makes society better. But I guess the better way I would answer it is that humans exist to complement each other. Morocco, for instance, is a trained pharmacist, but a better designer, I guess. As a designer, as a human-centered designer, he exists to complement other people who are actually creating stuff. So let's assume you're a developer, Emmanuel. I know that. So let's assume you're as a developer, Emmanuel. All you do is just write lines of code, and then you display it for people to see. Nobody's going to buy your product. That doesn't make any sense to anybody. You need a Moroccan, for instance, to then design what that product is going to look like. So I guess that because humans exist to complement each other, we can think about that as, you know, in terms of the genders as well. All of us have like unique differences. And if we marry those unique differences together, we can get like something whole and, you know, better for society.
Thank you very much for that point, Femi. And I think that's another thing, again, I'd like us to touch on, just hinging on the restrictions that abound in accommodating what men want, is the repercussions that exist. For instance, as a man, I want to be this, I want to be dominant, I want to be assertive, and then it's labeled as toxic masculinity. As a man, I don't want much. I just want a small house, and I just want, you know, my little bed there. It's termed as laziness. So the point is that we can admit that we are growing, and such conversations help in actually reorienting societal mindsets. But whether you like it or not, whatever shifts outside of what society wants that a man takes in this moment, on the backdrop of his wants, is going to have societal repercussions, right? And so, what would you say to those men out there that have seen that their wants do not align with society? Should they be bold and brave and go on with it and face, the consequences that might be there, which might actually be very grievous? Or what would be the best line of action? Yemisi, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this.
First of all, I'm going to start with, like, nobody should ever be embarrassed to be themselves. So if they want to be expressive about that, they should be. But then as a shift is happening for men, it's happening for women as well. So the repercussions, per se, let's say a man now that no longer wants to fall into the traditional role of provision, or doesn't want the entire family burden to be upon his head, he finds someone that is complementary or does something else that it doesn't, like someone said before, it doesn't remove your responsibility. A lot of people try and use individuality to escape responsibility, and that's not what's supposed to happen. You can be your own individual, but then realize that, okay, now I don't want to work, but then how are you going to eat? Like, there has to be something. You can't entirely give up one thing for the other. So in as much as you're trying to chase who you are and chase this new idea of what you think your man should be, you should be able to think, okay, there are consequences for my action. If, like, now I want to change roles in the middle of my career, in the meantime, what is going to be happening? How am I going to feel? Let's assume now that I don't have a family I'm supposed to take care of, so my actions are only on me. So you find something that takes care of that space, because the world is going to continue moving whether you're ready or not. Like, long before, there was a time that women couldn't vote. There was even a time when men couldn't vote if they didn't have land. So, like, the world is not going to stop just because you have a problem. You are going to have to push with that problem until it is over, until you're able to prefer like a possible solution. So in as much as we're trying to go for what we want, we have to still be able to think about, how else can I, as I'm tackling this problem, how can I survive in this world that I'm currently in?
Thank you very much, Yemisi, for that point. So in closing, I'd like to ask, thinking around what men want generally, what are we going to be talking about this topic, in the future? Say in 5 years' time, what is that world that you imagine in 5 years' time that you would want to actually see yourself in relation to what men want? Femi, do you have thoughts on this? Closing.
Closing thoughts. Yes. So the world that I would love to see is a world where people are bold, men, women, and are able to pursue their dreams. That is the kind of world, I guess, all of us would like to live in, where somebody's daring enough to go solve a problem that nobody else dares to do. Or like when somebody is different from them, they can say, oh, I am unique in this way as a result of the fact that I'm bold. But that freedom to be able to make decisions that better our lives, that kind of world is where I want to live in. But we don't want to forget the part of responsibility that MEC has hammered on, right? It doesn't matter that you're not able to get what you want right now, right? You still have to be responsible enough for yourself, responsible for your environment, responsible for people around you. Because, sometimes we forget that even though we want certain things, we don't always get what we want. It was a perfect introduction, I guess. We don't always get what we want. So while you don't have what you want, still retain responsibility. But the world that I want to see, the world I guess that we all should build and strive for, is the world where everybody's free to choose. But I guess that cannot happen. That will not drop. It is people inside this audience, people in the audience now that are listening to this, all the people commenting on the chat that are going to make that world happen. You and I are going to then go out and say, hey, I'm not going to tolerate any injustice. When you see somebody, for instance, who is just trying to be themselves, they're not hurting anybody, you should be able to step in, because that's the way the world is going to change. We see the feminist drive today has changed a lot about how the world affects women. And the reason is because a couple of people stood up to fight for it, despite the fact that they are going to face certain consequences. Also, about the consequences, and on a final note, that it is important to understand your own threshold as a person, and not allow for societal pressure to lead you to do certain things that you may not have the capability to bear as a person. It's very important. I always make this example, and I tell people yes, we want a world that is safe, where everyone is secure. While we are striving towards that world, it would be foolish for you to buy a Rolls Royce and drive to one of the most notorious areas, wind your glasses down, bring out your iPhone 13, and jam loud music with dollars on your seat. So if somebody comes to rob you, that would be your own, as a result of your own, I guess, maybe not so wise decision. So if you don't understand where the society is at presently, where you can come and where you can contribute, and what your threshold is, that might just take some thinking, and you may just want to do that. But
thank you very much, Femi. Mo, briefly, final words.
So it's like Femi has access to my notes. I need to. So I was actually going to just close on this note that, in addition to freedom that we've been mentioning the whole time, which is very valid, I think a very key word to add to that is respect. Respect for certain things. Firstly, respect for our different strengths. Respect for our different weaknesses. And then understanding our different boundaries. And also being able to understand the fact that boundaries are constantly changing. So it takes being self-aware and socially aware at every point in time to always reevaluate that. What are the boundaries currently? What boundaries are there on this particular matter? And if you do not know, it's okay to ask, right? Rather than assume or to stick with some old constructs that are no more valued in the current situation where you find yourself in. And then also coming to a place of understanding that you have to make compromises in some cases. What you want and what you need may not always align, but provided it is okay to want those things, I think there's a place of coming to a compromise, of then understanding how can we both win in this scenario, right? That we can have a win-win rather than, oh, it has to be my way or no other way. So I think that's very important, being very, 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 very aware of and respectful of what our different strengths are, what the shifting boundaries are, and then coming to a place of understanding that in some cases you have to make compromises, right? I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. Osita, your thoughts? How you want to think about this topic in 5 years' time, in the future? What men want? What kind of atmosphere would you want to exist for men and what they want?
I think that the world would have changed a lot in the next 5 years. the world would have changed a lot. Many of the things we want right now may not actually be the things we want in the next
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah.
So what I think is that over time, the more people think around what they want, they start to realize that maybe those things were not even as important as they thought, and it will sort of change their narrative. I think that in the next 5 years, for example, the issue of people who is responsible for taking care of the family and all that may not really even be a social issue anymore, because people will be used to the man and the woman chipping in equally or thereabouts. The arrangement will be a bit more settled than it is now, because our parents' generation had a different way entirely that they handled it, and our own generation has a different way that we're handling it. So I think that what men want may have changed a lot, because even the social expectations would have also changed. So that those are
Thank
my
you so much. Thank you so much. Yemisi, to wrap us up.
Well, first is I entirely agree with Osita and say, like, I just hope we're not still talking about the same things that we're talking about today in 5 years' time. So that's just it for me. We would have grown. People would see other people as individuals on their own and not try to put people in a box. Like, somebody can be so many different things, and that shouldn't affect how you treat the person, how you see the person, the opportunities they are able to get. So at the end of the day, it's still everybody being able to hold their individualism while still being responsible, whilst respecting another person's boundaries, because your rights end where someone else begins. So in your drive to be your own individual, you shouldn't infringe on other people's rights. So in like 5 years' time, I want us to be like on a much higher pedestal. We shouldn't still be discussing very trivial things as per who cooks in the night or who picks up kids. So we should have been able to go beyond this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yemisi. And I want to appreciate every single person that honored our invitation. It's been such a wonderful time. Your chats have been very informative, even informing the framework in which we're thinking around the whole subject. And the questions were actually well thought out as well. Give us something to think about. So I appreciate everyone. Boys to Men Foundation is doing their own part in encouraging everyone to have such conversations that have been neglected till now. These are very important things, and we need to talk about them more. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience and your insights. And I hope that we can actually do this again. And for our panelists, thank you so much for the brilliant points. Thank you for the counterpoints. Thank you for giving me things to think about, as well as the audience as well. I'm actually very grateful for that. So have a blessed weekend, and for all the Nigerians in the house, happy independence. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.